Saturday morning cartoons were awesome. From the 1960s through the 1990s, we kicked off each weekend in a frenzy of animation that is unmatched today.
But were these shows actually any good? Join us as we dig into the history of your favorite and not so favorite Saturday morning cartoons, look at the good, the bad, and the ugly of each one, and determine if our nostalgia matches the reality when it comes to these tunes.
So stay in your PJs, grab a bowl of cereal, and settle in. I'm John.
And I'm Robert.
And this is Toon Talk.
So John.
Yeah.
Are you a fan of cheese?
I love cheese.
What's your favorite kind?
Swiss cheese.
Swiss cheese?
Yeah.
All right. I do like cheddar. I'm like a big fan of Gouda, but are you a fan of big red cheese?
Big red cheese? Well, I am now.
Well, of course, big red cheese is actually the taunt of the villains from Shazam, the superhero. And tonight we're looking at Shazam from 1981 that was produced by Filmation Productions.
Yeah, and I don't have any memory of this.
I have a very vague memory. This is like creeping back way back into the memory banks of young Robert.
The Wayback Machine.
Yeah, and like probably 5 years old.
Uh-huh.
I actually do remember this show existing and actually glimpses and memories of it. I don't remember any of the bad guys or what happened, but I do remember the transformation scenes when the characters say Shazam and they turn into the superheroes.
Right.
I do distinctly remember that. That's probably all I remember. And wow. I also remember my my Captain Marvel sneakers that I had when I was...
Could you run super fast in those?
I thought I could.
Yeah. Well, that's all that matters.
Well, and it's interesting because the history of Shazam is actually... It's very long and it's very detailed. I mean, if we did it long and detailed, it's actually a very long, detailed history of Captain Marvel / Shazam. Because it includes, incredible rise in popularity, corporate battles back and forth, a long drawn out legal battle, and then a forced name change. There's a lot going on. We're not going to go into all of that.
Okay.
We'll do the 30,000 foot view.
We'll do the Cliff's Notes version of it.
We'll do the drive-by history of it, but it's pretty fascinating because so Billy Batson would first appear in Whiz Comics number 2 in 1939 under Fawcett Comics. Interestingly enough, there was no such thing as Whiz Comics number 1. They started at number 2 for some reason.
Okay.
And so when Billy says the magic word Shazam, he turns into the hero Captain Marvel, who's also called the world's mightiest mortal. And Shazam stood for the wisdom of Solomon, the strength of Hercules, the stamina of Atlas, the power of Zeus, the courage of Achilles, and the speed of Mercury. So all these mythological creatures, they all
together.
Yeah, all their powers come together and create this hero. Created by Bill Parker and C.C. Beck, the whole idea was that Fawcett wanted a Superman look-alike, or like a similar character, like with the power, the strong,
sure,
can
with
fly,
the cape and can fly,
and super powerful. And because Superman was the big name on the block. Everybody knew Superman. It was like he cornered the market on comic books at that time.
Yeah,
and so they wanted something that they could put out there similar to it, and so Captain Marvel, as he was originally known, quickly became a sensation. He got to the point where he was actually more popular than Superman.
Come on.
Consistently outselling Superman month to
Really?
month. Yes. Captain Marvel was top of the heap. And so Fawcett Comics, the publisher, they jumped at the chance to capitalize on that. And they're like, hey, if everybody likes this guy, let's do more.
Sure.
So they created Freddie Freeman, who is this newsboy who had injured. He was had been crippled in his leg, and he was actually kind of serious. He was dying, and Captain Marvel came over and shared some of his power to keep him alive, to save his life.
Right.
And so then he became Captain Marvel Jr.
Yeah.
Who actually... Elvis was a huge fan of Captain Marvel Jr. He actually used to model some of his outfits, some of the 70s with their big collars and things like that.
Yeah, well, and I also noticed the Elvis's logo with the TCB logo, the Taking Care of Business logo, has a lightning bolt in it.
Captain Marvel Jr.
That's from Captain Marvel. Yep, I didn't know that.
That's where that inspiration came
from.
Yeah,
my world just got smaller.
So you had Freddie Freeman. There's also Mary Bromfeld. So she was written in as Billy's long lost and unknown sister. So he had no idea his sister, but she was there, and she gained the powers of Captain Marvel because she would also say Shazam.
Yeah.
That wasn't shared to her. Because brother and sister, she had that ability, and she was actually the first female derivative of a male superhero, predating Supergirl by 17 years.
Wow.
Yeah, so Supergirl is kind of considered like, again, the standard, like, well, Superman, Supergirl, but
yeah,
Mary Marvel was around first.
Really?
By quite a while.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a whole generation of comic book readers, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
17 years, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, she's had a really long, pretty successful history on her own right, too, within the comics. But unlike Billy, so her Shazam powers were made up of those from Selena, so she had Selena's grace, Hippolyta's strength, Adrian's skill, Zephyrus's fleetness and flight, and Aurora's beauty, and Minerva's wisdom. So because she's a lady, she gets lady powers.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it's basically the same thing. They do everything the same. It's just
the female version of.
Exactly. Yeah, because they couldn't be the same, I guess. But then they also introduced a con man by the name of Uncle Dudley. So he had actually no connection to the Marvel family, but he just he found out that they had these powers, and so he tried to get in with the family, claimed he was Mary's uncle.
Yeah.
And said he had powers too. Sure. And I mean, it was all pretend, and they're just like, yeah, you don't have it. But you know what?
That should be easy to figure out.
Well, and they knew it, but they just said he was a harmless old coot, and we'll just let him hang around.
Hang out,
we'll pretend that, we'll pretend along with him that he has powers, whatever. Yeah. And
the poor guy, let's just let him live his dream.
Yeah, it's very odd.
Yeah.
But I mean, this is early 1940s, I guess. Sure. You got to introduce him somehow. And,
right.
Then there was a handful of other Marvels lieutenants who were three men named Billy Batson. They just shared the same name, no relation. They just had this name.
Same name.
When they said Shazam, one became Fat Billy, one was Tall Billy, and one was Hillbilly.
Which I love that.
Very descriptive. Unfortunately for Fat Billy, that was his.
Yeah, that stuck with him.
But you had Hoppy the Marvel Bunny, who was a giant pink rabbit.
Which was not in this cartoon.
No, he was not in this cartoon.
Thank God.
He looked very similar to like the early Bugs Bunny.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, kind of like the little rounded ears, kind of like the little more, kind of like the swooping lines.
Swoopy back, yeah.
And then you had Freckles Marvel, who is actually Dudley's niece, real niece, not the pretend like he's related to Mary.
Yeah,
they were actually
related.
She also had no powers, but she had a mean right hook.
Yeah,
she was tough. She was street tough.
Okay. Well, it's a nickname like Freckles. You got to be a gangster, right?
So yeah, I mean, it was. They kept expanding, trying to get as many, as much interest as they could. But interestingly enough, Captain Marvel's popularity just drew the ire of National Comics, which later became DC Comics. Not happy that Superman was being outshined, they filed a lawsuit that claimed that the Captain Marvel character was a copyright infringement of Superman. Huh. And so for over 12 years, the case went back and forth. Initially, it was awarded to Fawcett, saying, no, it's different enough. And then upon appeal, DC ended up winning. And so Fawcett was forced to cease all publication, and they had to pay DC damages for about $400,000 in compensation.
And when was this? The 60s?
Yeah, this was into the 60s and 70s.
So that's a lot of money.
60s and into the 70s. Yeah. And so on top of that, there's a publication ban. Obviously, so during that time, Captain Marvel, the name is not being used, the trademark lapses, Marvel Comics swoops in, creates their own Captain Marvel character. And so they actually now would then take the trademark of that name, and it's any use of Captain Marvel has to go through Marvel.
Go through them now.
And not through Fawcett Comics.
Oh.
So
wow.
So this is the 1960s. 1972, DC then would Fawcett's starting to fail at this point because they can't publish their most popular characters, and they ended up selling basically everything over to DC. Okay. So all the rights for Captain Marvel and all those characters, they begin printing, but of course they have to print under the name Shazam. because
they can't use
Captain Marvel anymore.
Huh.
So in 1973, I believe is
That's
the
when it
first
changed too.
That was the first series that would show up. I believe it was The Power of Shazam was the series. But yeah.
Yeah, so that's interesting because, I didn't know anything really about Shazam. And when I started watching the cartoons, I'm like, wait a minute, his name's Captain Marvel? Why is this cartoon called Shazam? It took me a couple episodes to put that together. I'm like, oh, okay, I see what's going on here.
Yeah, he says
but
Shazam
I didn't know
and he
why.
becomes Captain Marvel, yeah.
Yeah, he says Shazam, and then he becomes Captain Marvel. But going into this, I'm like, well, he's Shazam.
Yeah.
I thought that was the hero's name.
And it's especially confusing when you get into the cartoon and they say, well, Freddie Freeman just says the name of his favorite superhero, Captain Marvel.
Right. So, but he doesn't
then
turn
if you
into Captain Marvel.
No, he turns into Captain Marvel Jr. because Captain Marvel is actually Shazam. But he's not Captain Marvel anymore. It's all very confusing. But
yeah. I'm glad I'm not the only one.
Yeah, no, it's
I'm like, I can't figure this out.
And
this
luckily,
is a children's cartoon and everything.
And luckily, they don't dwell on the details too much.
No, not too much.
Yeah, they kind of gloss over it. But,
Yep.
So Filmation Productions enters the picture in 1974. So they create a live action Shazam show, and it's Billy traveling around the country in an RV with some guy named Mentor.
Mm-hmm. His mentor.
Not Jim, not Steve, it's Mentor.
Mentor. It's not Robert or John. It's Mentor.
No, just Mentor.
Yeah.
And they drive around the country taking on common thugs and crooks. And somehow this went for 3 seasons.
Really?
Actually, the actor Billy changed after the second season.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, I mean, it's not like they were long seasons. I believe it was, and they were Saturday mornings. So it was like,
sure.
I believe it was a total of maybe 30 episodes.
Okay.
Over those 3 seasons. But I've never watched it. But the idea of a superhero just hanging out in an RV.
Yeah. It's down by the river.
It's kind of odd. Ultimately, DC would actually take that idea, that mentor character, and modify him to become Uncle Dudley in the comics. So they would just to kind of draw a parallel.
Morph him back in, yeah.
Yeah. I guess trying to find a way to use that Uncle Dudley character.
Yeah.
So Filmation, it was not done with Shazam. They would bring him back in the animated for in 1981, as we've seen. And it was part of the Kid Superpower Hour with Shazam.
Yeah.
They were 1-hour episodes that would feature 2 different cartoons over basically the 1 year life of the show. There was Shazam, and then the other half hour was Hero High. Now that's a show, I don't know if you remember hearing that name before, but we've talked about it briefly. Yeah. So it was a show about teenagers attending high school for superheroes.
Right.
And back in episode 10, we mentioned Hero High as it was originally meant to be a vehicle for the Archie characters.
Yeah.
Filmation's like, well, because they kept doing these different Archie shows, and they were going to try and change it up and give them superpowers.
Right.
And right before, actually they had gone into production and realized that they no longer owned the rights to the Archie characters and could not obtain them. So they had to go and on the fly turn them into these generic,
so it
original
like these
characters.
People needed better lawyers. Things would have been easier if they had proper counsel.
Well, we know Filmation was very up and down in terms of like some of the things that they did.
Yeah.
So. But the Kid Superpower Hour with Shazam debuted on NBC on September 12th, 1981, and it ran for 39 episodes, which is interesting because there were only 12 actual Shazam cartoons. Yeah. Most of those put
the Hero High stuff.
The Hero High stuff, and they would basically intersect them with some like live action vignettes.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
I've never watched it.
Me either.
I have no interest to watch it.
Yeah. I only watched the 12. I watched the 12 Shazam episodes.
Yeah. So So the short Shazam run would actually include, so it was Billy, Mary, Freddie, and Uncle Dudley. It also introduced, well, I shouldn't say introduced, but it also included Mr. Tawny, a talking tiger, an anthropomorphic talking tiger. Yeah. And he was actually in a suit. He was actually a regular from the Fawcett comics. Showed up regularly in the Shazam comics. Yeah. Once you got into DC, not as much. He does show up periodically. Mm-hmm. Actually, I believe they reference him here and there in the current version, but he's not anthropomorphic. Really? He's just a tiger. Just a tiger. A tiger that Billy would visit in the zoo. Okay. They may have changed that since. It was an interesting take.
That's a sordid past.
Well, and it's between Uncle Dudley particularly and Mr. Tawny, they feel very much of the Golden Age comics. Yeah. They feel like their source material.
Let's have a talking tiger. The kids will love it.
Well, I mean, hey, they love Tony the Tiger. Maybe it can hawk some cereal. And
yeah, there you go. Well, I'm just imagining some artist, in the comic book world going, hey, look, I drew a picture of a tiger. Can I use it in her book? Yeah, let's put it in the comic book.
Put a tie on him.
The first time I saw Tawny, I thought he was like the mayor of the town because he was like wearing a suit, and it was the first episode was What's New at the Zoo or something, What's Changed at the Zoo. And he was there, and I'm like, oh, maybe he's there for a ribbon cutting opening of the new exhibit or whatever. I'm like, I couldn't figure out why he was there, and he was wearing a suit. I'm like, well, he must be the mayor. But then, like, it's a normal town, but there's a talking tiger that is walking on his hind legs.
Yeah, and nobody seems
to care. He's just one of the gang. Yeah. Just one of the hapless citizens.
Yeah, it's an interesting cartoon. And actually, part of what makes it interesting is some of the vocal talent that they bring into it.
There's some big hitters in here. Yeah, Billy Batson, Captain Marvel / Shazam, was Burr Middleton. And tons of credits as just announcer or background voice. He didn't have a lot of lead roles as a voice artist. But that's not true for the rest of the cast. Mary Batson and Mary Marvel was Dawn Jeffrey. Dawn Jeffrey was a big TV actor in the 80s, probably best known for Tourist Trap and Mommy Dearest, which that show still haunts me. Mommy Dearest with the, she was an abusive mother, right? And would hit her child with
wire hangers.
Wire hangers. And to this day, I see a wire hanger, I think of Mommy Dearest. And lots of TV bit parts. I mean, if there was any kind of 80s drama or sitcom, she was most likely in it as a role part, maybe not a recurring character, but she was kind of the utility knife of actresses in the 80s television. Freddie Freeman as Captain Marvel Jr., voiced by Barry Gordon. Barry Gordon, this is awesome. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Donatello. Pac-Man Inky, one of the ghosts. Also, the president of the Screen Actors Guild from 1988 to 1995.
Wow. He
was also the voice of the Nesquik Bunny.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, which everyone knows the Nesquik Bunny, right? But my favorite thing about Barry Gordon is, the song, I'm Getting Nuttin' for Christmas, sung by a 6-year-old boy named Barry Gordon.
Interesting.
So Barry Gordon, Freddie Freeman from the Shazam cartoon sang the song I'm Getting Nuttin' for Christmas, which you still hear on the radio.
Yeah, you do.
To this day.
It's that novelty song.
Yeah, it's a novelty Christmas song that everybody knows, and it's this whiny little kid, and it's him. When he was 6, he sang that song and recorded it, and we're still listening to it now. Uncle Dudley also was Dr. Savannah, was the same character, also Tawny. And Shazam, the wizard, was Alan Oppenheimer. Alan Oppenheimer was, among other things, in the He-Man cartoon, he was Man-at-Arms.
Okay.
He was also Skeletor.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and lots of other voices, including Battle Cat and other bit parts in the He-Man cartoon. In Transformers, he was Warpath. And in The New Adventures of Flash Gordon in 1979, he played Ming the Merciless, which I was like, wow, that's kind of a big role, you know, for that cartoon. And by the way, I was also in He-Man, and I was Uncle Dudley and all these other things. Skeletor, minor characters. Sterling Morris, Mr. Mind, and Black Adam were voiced by Lou Scheimer. He was the co-founder of Filmation. Yep. He also did some work in He-Man with Alan Oppenheimer. He was King Randor and Orko. Orko was the little sorcerer guy.
Another Filmation
sorcerer in a red robe and a hat. He also produced The New Adventures of Superman in 1966, The Archie Show, and He-Man. So he was mostly a producer and just lent his voice into this cartoon. The narrator was Norm Prescott, mostly a producer and a composer, known for small, lesser-known films like Footloose and Star Trek the Animated Series and Journey Back to Oz in 1972.
Interesting.
So half of this cast were actors, and half of them were producers who also did some acting.
Yeah.
Norm Prescott, mostly through my research, known as a composer, actually composing music for movies. So the voice that I really enjoyed, though, was Tawny the the tiger, because his voice was really cool in this. You know, he had that kind of rolling R growl when he talked. I'm like, that's pretty neat.
Yeah,
you know,
and it had like this, and it had a huff to his voice too.
Yeah,
like,
he was kind of it's like, wow, that's really a tiger that learned to speak English. You know, it's not like a tiger character. Right. I mean, it's just like, if I had to imagine what a tiger's talking voice would sound like, that's it. It's not Tony the tiger, you know, because it's this guy. It was pretty cool. I also liked how Billy Batson's voice, even though it was the same actor, was very different when he was Captain Marvel.
Right.
I mean, his voice changed dramatically, but it was the same voice actor. Mary Marvel and Captain Marvel Jr., they sounded about the same as their non-hero part, but Billy Batson and Captain Marvel sounded very different, and it was the same. It was Burr Middleston. It was the same actor doing both voices, which I thought was really cool. Not a lot of people can pull that off, especially in the same show, you know, in the same production. You can do it for different characters and different pieces, but when he's going back and forth like that, I was really impressed. I was also impressed that Barry Gordon, you know, grew up to be the president of the Screen Actors Guild for that long, you know, to come from a background of as a voice actor to that level in Hollywood is pretty neat. You know, there were a lot of other characters that were only in 1 or 2 episodes. I had trouble finding more information on some of the smaller parts. Mr. Mind, who was the talking earthworm, or the earthworm that talked with the use of a voice box.
It's actually a worm from an alien worm from Venus.
Is that what it was? Yes. So they didn't explain that. You know that. I don't know that. That was also Sterling Morris' character played Mr. Mind too. But I think that voice had a little help because it was very electronic because it was coming through that voice box on his chest, which I didn't know if that was an interpreter or that's just how he, you know, interpreted his alien language or his worm language into English, which is what I believed it was. But then, well, whose voice is that? You know, I couldn't figure it out. But yeah, I enjoyed the voice acting was good.
Yeah, it was good.
Yeah, they were really cognizant of making all these characters sound different because they were different people, even though it was the same actor. Yeah. You know, a lot of times you can tell it's the same guy.
And nothing felt out of place. We're like, well, that voice doesn't seem to fit. It seems that everything kind of clicked. I mean,
I think it was well cast.
And even like the whiny, like the nasally kind of whiny Dr. Savannah is kind of like, that fits. Like this kind of, short, bald, mad scientist. He's got that kind of crazy.
Right? And Uncle Dudley. So we had a discussion about who is Uncle Dudley. And I thought he was like W.C. Fields. You had a different take.
Well, that's who he was. Like the character in the comics was actually, that's who he was modeled off.
So I was
W.C.
right.
Fields. You were on the nose. That, But when, the other thing that I was kind of in my head, he's like, he's kind of like wimpy from Popeye. He's like, oh, I'll gladly trade you a hamburger for today for a
gladly pay you Tuesday for a hamburger today.
Yes. It's like, I'll gladly pay you Tuesday for superpowers today.
Yes, exactly. So it's a combination. If you could put W.C. Fields playing Wimpy.
I think
that's who it is.
It kind of felt like it. Yeah, in Uncle Dudley.
He was just a pathetic old man.
Yeah.
It seemed like they're just trying to keep him safe.
Yeah, it's they just humor him.
Yeah.
And it seems like every other episode he's putting on like a little magic show in the house for them, and then something happens and they leave and like,
right. Okay, thanks, Dudley. We gotta go.
Pat the old man on the head and leave and
exactly.
We're gonna go save the world now.
With this tiger. And then I started to wonder, is because he's big friends with Tawny. The tiger was always around.
Yeah.
And like, so is the tiger like Snuffleupagus? Is it like his Uncle Dudley's make-believe friend?
Get the sense that Tawny wanted nothing to do with Dudley. He's like, I'm stuck with this guy again.
Yeah, there was one particular episode where Tawny was watching a television program about something, and Uncle Dudley wanted to show him his new magic remote he was working on. And you could tell he was just exasperated. He's like, again. I just want to watch the show.
There's that guy again.
Yeah.
Just let me. Leave me in peace, you crazy coot.
Please just leave me alone. I don't know why I'm here.
Well, I mean, I'm gonna skip to one of the episodes then when you talk about Uncle Dudley's wedding day. If there's one component about about the show that I found insufferable. It was Uncle Dudley.
Yeah.
Like, I have no use for him.
He wasn't even comic relief.
He was. They intended him, I think.
Yeah, but he
wasn't.
No,
he was just kind of obnoxious. And so, I mean, when you have an episode like Uncle Dudley's Wedding Day, where it's just
focused
Dudley
on him.
centric.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a hard no.
Right.
Like, I mean,
I did suffer through that episode.
Yeah, I watched it.
There were only 12 episodes. If there were more than 12, I would not have finished watching that episode.
Yeah, I mean, I watched it, but I'm not going to summarize it because just no.
Yeah.
No.
Because an alien comes and kidnaps him and forces him into marriage or something.
Yeah, and what was her name? Aunt something.
Yeah.
I can't even remember. I don't even care.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah. But yeah, some old lady who's infatuated with Dudley.
Yeah.
And then tries to force him to marry her.
Their shotgun wedding. Yeah.
No. But it's way too much Dudley and not enough of everybody else.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean that's the one. If there's a big negative for this show, it's Uncle Dudley. That character,
the whole character,
and that episode is I will not watch that one again.
So if Uncle Dudley isn't in the cartoon, nothing changes.
No. I think the only time he actually does anything of significance is I believe it's the one where the Savannah family gets all their powers. Episode 6, I think,
where he kind of saves the day.
Yeah, because he's
useful.
So they get the Savannah, which I didn't realize that Dr. Savannah had like 2 offspring, or niece and nephew. I guess I don't remember what they were, but they get this magic rod, the space rock, and it gives them superpowers equal to the Marvel family. And so they're going like
call them out.
Yeah, and so they're having like this kind of a stalemate, and then Uncle Dudley finds the rock, and so he actually does get superpowers,
right? And
they can't handle him.
Yeah.
And so he's able to like run out the clock. They run basically the clock runs out on their superpowers, and they can stop them. But
the funny thing was that Uncle Dudley, all of a sudden he has these powers, and he's like, doesn't think anything of it. Like, I've always had these powers. And it's clear that he don't. He just rolled with it. It was great. I did not like the Uncle Dudley's Wedding. Anything that was really focused on Uncle Dudley, I didn't care for. Overall, I thought the villains were equal parts interesting and equal parts disappointing because they showed so much promise. Like, well, this is a good villain. But then their big plan is like, what?
Yeah.
You're going to create sinkholes? So Mr. Mind, the worm, in episode 2, the incredible sinking city, decides he's going to rally all these earthworms together and we're going to tunnel under the city and create sinkholes, and then the city will give in to us. And he just wants to take over the city. It's like, you got to dream a little bigger,
Yeah, until it rains.
And then, the worms drown.
Like, we're done. We're out. You crazy worm, we're out of here. But my favorite scene in that whole thing, though, is like when the sinkholes first start hitting. It's downtown.
Yeah,
in the city.
Streets are falling through,
and Shazam comes swooping because there's a bus driving on the road. And it's about to go into the sinkhole. Shazam comes in and grabs it, picks it up, and flies it up in the air and takes it out of the city.
Yeah,
so it's like way out of the city. Sets it down, rips the door off, and flies away.
Right.
So
drive you to the middle of nowhere, leave you for dead.
Yeah, logistically. These kids are not getting home because they're not in their school district anymore.
Right.
And nobody knows where they are. There's no cell phones at this time. And they're cheering, yay! Captain Marvel
saved us.
And of course, then he leaves and they cut away. Yeah. If you stick with it, they're like, wait, how do we get home?
Now what?
Where are we? We can see the city on the horizon.
A couple of kids are motion sick from flying through the air in a bus.
Yeah, it was just kind of
because the city was skyline.
It's in the distance. Yeah,
so it's way back.
He put them. He set them down and it's just grass and trees.
Yeah, he could have just moved them away from the sinkhole instead of like this whole city was on fire and he moved them to the country.
Nope, you're going to Nebraska.
Yeah, exactly. It did look like Nebraska. Actually. Looked like Nebraska with a distant view of Kansas City. Yeah, that was a little overkill, I think. Episode 5, Black Adam's Return.
Mm-hmm.
Black Adam returns, and his whole plot is to destroy North America, right? That's what he wants to do. Billy's on vacation, and it's up to Captain Marvel Jr. and Mary Marvel to warn him to save the day. And, we all know Black Adam has the same powers as Captain Marvel, but he went bad for some reason. He was a jerk, and he just was kind of a bad guy, but not...
He was never truly worthy of the powers of Shazam.
Right. He's a little selfish.
Yeah, they made a misjudgment, and he was able to...
Yeah. So, they go to Shazam, the wizard, like, how do we stop this guy? And in classic wizard fashion, just like... He must have hung out with Dungeon Master from Dungeons and Dragons. He's like, oh, I know how to stop him. And they're like, well, tell us. He's like, no, that's up to you to figure out. And I just wanted Shazam to just grab him by the beard and say, what's wrong with you? You're going to make us go through all of this? So they figure out the way to stop him is just to get Black Adam to say Shazam. Mm-hmm. Don't get me wrong, he's got skills. But they beat him, they get him to say Shazam by building a wooden treasure chest in space. They're in space and they find a forest and they build this wooden treasure chest with a lock on it. And inside the chest, they put a little note that says, to whom it may concern, Shazam. So he finds the treasure chest, pries it open because there must be something in there. It's a treasure chest, and reads this note and he turns into dust.
Yeah. And it's funny.
He's got to be smarter than that.
Well, Black Adam goes through some things in this episode. Yeah. So he comes out and he starts off, he's threatening and he's kind of, he's a mean guy.
It's bad news.
Yeah, he's a bad guy. And then suddenly his focus is that I've got to bring back Queen Jamina or this.
Yeah, his queen has been buried for as long as he was.
Yeah, so he's going to rescue her and bring her back, and he does. And as soon as she shows up, he's like this caricature of like this browbeaten husband. He's just like taking it from his shrewish wife, and he's like, oh,
he's so afraid of her.
He's like, what do you do? Why'd you take so long?
Yeah, why did you leave me in here?
And he's just like, I'm so sorry. And then so he goes from terrifying to just a putz.
Right.
And then next thing you know, she's taken. They like destroy his staff, and she gets taken out. She's gone. She's off the table. And then suddenly he just becomes a creep.
Yeah.
Because like he actually uses some magic and he makes some basically freeze in place, and he comes up to Mary. He's like, "Oh, you're good looking.
Yeah,
you might make a good queen. Why don't you come with me?"
Right.
And he takes her off to outer space.
He hypnotizes her with his little gem or something.
Yeah. Well, I mean, whatever it is. So she's just like, okay, I'll go along because she's hypnotized.
Yeah.
And then they go off to space for reasons.
Where they're going. Yeah, because he's from Egypt.
They
right?
fly. Yeah, they fly off into outer space. Yeah. And then finally they make him read his name, and they make him read the magic word, and he's done. But it's weird. He goes through some things in that. There's an arc in there.
Yeah. Maybe we know why Black Adam is so weird. There's some issues there,
but it's amazing. It's actually all those things going on. It's interesting. As weird as it is, it's an interesting episode. Just because it's
well, that's why it was one of my favorites. Because like, who's this guy? And he's kind of, I couldn't really describe him even as a villain at the end of the day.
No,
he's just like a jerk.
Yeah, I did like so he actually came back though in episode 8. There's a little something extra. In that one, he comes back and he's more of a threat. He's just like, all right, I'm taking you guys out. He finds out who the Marvel family is, and there's a whole lot of conflict. Again, he
knows their secret.
Yes. Yeah. And so he actually sends them back in time, and they have to they go back to ancient Egypt to his origins, and they find a way using that to actually ultimately send him back.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. It's kind of the same thing. Mary just like, well, yeah, you only get your powers because you say, and then she like stumbles to say like the word Shazam, and he's like, you silly idiot, it's Shazam. Like, oh. And then he gets sent back to his original time. It was actually clever, and for something like that's probably as close to like a comic book as any of these episodes felt like a true like conflict and peril and things like that. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's no peril in any of these episodes, really, but that's as close as it came. And it was interesting though.
Yeah. Who was the character? I want to say it was in Flintstones, the alien that they had to get him to say his name.
The Great Gazoo?
Yes.
I think are you confusing him with Mr. Mixoplitzik from Superman?
I am confusing him with that. Yeah.
So that was the
same type of thing.
Like the fifth dimension who would show up and just kind of just harass Superman until he could get him to say his name and
then go backwards. Yeah. Say it backwards. Yeah. Yeah. I was like, wait, this is familiar. There's more than one.
If only they could have gotten rid of the Great Gazoo that way, that would have saved things.
Yeah, because the Great Gazoo is They jumped the shark. They jumped the prehistoric shark with the great kazoo. Other villains, the villain I really enjoyed, Mr. Adam from Mr. Adam the Smasher, episode 10. His plan is to take over the world using this army of robots he built, which I'm like, hey man, he's got an army, right? Yeah. He's prepared. He came to this with some ammunition. And so I'm like, wow, this guy's got real potential. I mean, this is going to be tough. So his whole plan is to create a traffic jam. That's how he's going to browbeat the city into submission with a traffic jam. So he's got robot police officers misdirecting traffic to create a traffic jam. I'm like, dude, you got to think bigger. I mean, traffic jams are frustrating, but only for a little bit of time. Nobody's going to submit to your powers because they can't get to work.
Yeah. If I just snag traffic in Fawcett City, the world will be mine.
Exactly. Just like, I was stunned. I'm like, okay, he's got this army of robots. What's he going to do? Traffic jam. Yeah. And so then from there, he takes a big step, though, and he ransoms the UN. It's like,
what's he going to do? Like, kind of like have them like block the parking ramp at the UN so they can't get out?
Exactly. Yeah, so he tells the UN, I have all these robots and we're going to destroy all the infrastructure, dams and bridges and electric plants and whatever. If you don't say I'm the supreme leader of the world.
Well, at least you're thinking bigger.
Yeah, they were thinking bigger. He was thinking a lot bigger. But then the UN's like, no. No, thanks. So then it's up to Shazam or Captain Marvel and the gang to stop him. Mm-hmm. In the meantime, Uncle Dudley is working on a super powerful garage door opener using vacuum tubes. And he can't find the third vacuum tube he needs, and he looks in the, attic or garage or something and finds one and plugs it in. Well, then it turns into this super powerful thing that's disrupting electronics all over Fawcett City. Mm-hmm. And Captain Marvel's like, I need to find out where this is coming from. So he flies back home and finds Uncle Dudley messing with this thing. And he takes the vacuum tube out and everything goes back to normal. Yeah. And he's like, well, I can use this to stop the robots. His new invention's a super strong remote-controlled garage door opener. And they use it to destroy all the robots except for Mr. Adam. Because Mr. Adam's a robot too, but it doesn't affect him somehow. And then they finally go to Mr. Adams' lair, which is like an old electronics factory. And they're like, well, there must be a big magnet around here somewhere.
It's no Radio Shack.
Yeah. So they turn on this giant magnet and he's stuck to this giant magnet. Ha, we got you. But it all started with Uncle Dudley's garage door opener.
And I love how, and we kind of mentioned that one before. That's the episode between him and Tawny, and Tawny's just like,
leave me alone.
Yeah, they show up like Billy shows up and or Shazam shows up and they're trying to figure out the whole remote thing. He's like, yeah, you see this clown?
Yes.
He's trying to do some remote. He can't figure anything out. He's an idiot.
He built a remote. He doesn't know what it's for, but he's calling it a
Why do you leave me with this guy? Why do you do this to me?
Maybe he needs to go somewhere safe. And drop him off in a home somewhere.
There are places for guys like him.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I had one more. I wouldn't call it a favorite, but I did want to make note. So the last one, the Star Master and the Solar Mirror, episode 12. Mm-hmm. So it's fine. It's mostly forgettable cartoon.
Yeah.
What's significant of it, at least for this particular show, is that it does a crossover with Hero High.
Yeah, and it's the only one of the 12.
Correct.
Yeah.
So there's the three members that make their appearance in this cartoon to kind of help the Marvels out and save the day. And that's about all it's worth saying. But I mean, having watched that, I'm like, I have no desire to go back and want to see the Hero High. I mean, they're just kind of like these generic.
Yeah. Did you ever see the movie Sky High? Which was about a superhero. That was a cool movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Actually, I hope it had nothing to do with Hero High.
I don't think it was associated with that. No.
Yeah. And there's a cameo by Linda Carter in that. She's Principal Powers.
Well,
she's the principal.
Yeah, you say that. I remember that now. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, no, they kind of felt like...
Yeah, Hero High doesn't seem like it's worth the time.
They just felt like kind of knockoffs of DC's Legion of Superheroes.
Yeah.
Just kind of...
Just miniature versions.
Yeah.
Teen versions.
Yeah, I had nothing...
Yeah.
Wasn't too interested in that. But I did like...
Episode 11, the circus plot, where the circus ringmaster finds this talking tiger, finds Mr. Tiny. Oh my God, you're a tiger that talks. You'll sell a ton of tickets. I'm going to have you audition for my circus. So instead of auditioning as, hey, I'm a talking tiger in a suit, he tries to sing, but he can't sing. And the audience is just booing.
Like covering their ears.
Covering their ears. They're not amazed that there's a tiger that can talk and kind of sing. They're just disappointed that he's off tune. You know, it's like, what? You got a talking tiger. It's like having a panda at the zoo. I mean, you just put that on the billboard. We have a talking tiger, and people will show up. But you try to make them sing, and like, no, it's not for us.
Give him some Hamlet. Let him go. I mean, it's... What do you need more than that? But no,
let's make you sing. Oh, you can't sing. Sorry. There's the door.
Oh, you suck. Get out of here. Bring that old guy out. Let him do his magic tricks.
That would actually be a great... Oh, God, that'd be awesome. Oh, there needs to be a spinoff of just Dudley and Tawny.
Oh, I would not watch
that. That'd be like The Odd Couple.
I would never watch that. I would watch a show about Talkie Tawny. Yeah. I couldn't handle anything with it. This already had too much of Uncle Dudley in it.
Yeah, so that was just a funny little thing. I don't even remember what else happened in that episode, but I remember that they were disappointed he couldn't sing, and I thought that was hilarious.
Yeah, and it's like the look on their faces too, because they see the Marvel family and Dudley all sitting there, and they're just like, "Oh, he's bad.
This is not good."
They're all just like, "Oh no,
how do we support our friend now?"
It's like we've made a horrible mistake. One thing I wanted to talk about. So before we started talking, you had mentioned, you kind of asked, "Hey, this is 1981, right?" Because it feels like it was made in the 1950s, and I think that's totally true. But the feel was very different for this one.
Yeah, it was, because to me it felt like the dialogue and even the situations and how the news was portrayed, and there was a corner newspaper boy, you know, I'm like, this feels like they're in the 50s, you know, and I couldn't I just had trouble with the timeline and what time is this supposed to be? Yeah.
Well, and I think part of that is the source material where it comes from, all those Fawcett comics, the Wiz comics, the Shazam, these are kind of pulled from that. So, you know, these villains are pretty ridiculous. Mr. Mind is a talking worm from Venus. Yeah. Dr. Savannah at various points was a mad genius who was like a Lex Luthor type of, you know, millionaire. At other points I think originally he was this brilliant scientist from Europe who was basically just so beaten down by like corporate overlords that he became bad. He was originally good, then he became bad. You had Ibach, who's basically just like a super strong thug. Yeah.
Doesn't even really need superheroes to handle him. You just need the police.
He's just a guy who's kind of strong. And I mean, and it's just, and of course the owl, I can't remember, what was his name? I don't even remember anymore.
I don't either.
The whole episode about him.
Yeah, they did. And Dr. Alarog was gorilla spelled backwards. Yeah. He was a talking gorilla. Well, he was in the zoo. He was in the first episode. The very first episode with the zoo. He was a genius talking gorilla.
Yeah, kind of like the equivalent of would be Gorilla Grodd in the Flash comics.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, they're really silly characters. Yeah. I mean, with the exception of Black Adam is really kind of another
hero.
Yeah, he's kind of a different layer of hero, but or villain, I should say. But the other ones are just kind of silly, and they match well with Golden Comic, the Golden Era of comics. Where
just outrageous.
It's just kind of outrageous and silly and fun. It's not really meant to be taken like, it's not dark, you know, like the dark, like especially the.
Well, like you said, there's not a lot of peril.
Yeah,
you know, it's just like he's doing the wrong thing. They're the bad guys, not villains.
Yeah, and it seemed to fit for this cartoon better than like Challenge of the Super Friends, where you had these known villains, like the Lex Luthor.
You know what they're capable of.
Yeah, and all they do is these really stupid things because it's like, because of standards and practices, they can only do so much. Right. And the heroes can only do so much to stop them. There's no fisticuffs, there's no kind of violence. It's just, okay.
Right. Well, that's kind of, I always had that stopping point watching these episodes because these villains were so ridiculous. Like, he's capable of some cool stuff. You know, like the robot army. Yeah. Like, dang, that's impressive. But then to use them to create a traffic jam, I'm like, this is just silly.
It works better in this cartoon than it did in like Challenge of the Super Friends because
Yeah.
they're already kind of ridiculous to start with.
Sure.
And then you can kind of ease into these silly things
Right,
a
the
bit
silliness,
more.
yeah.
And I did want to mention that I was excited to see the Crocodile Men show up in
Oh yes.
in episode 3 with Ibach they go back in time, and so the Crocodile Men again are like they show up periodically throughout Shazam's history. They're not like a regular recurring villain, but they just kind of keep showing up. They're like
henchmen.
Yeah, they're kind of what's called the Monster Society.
Okay.
And actually even like the live action movie that came out a couple years ago, they actually have a nod to they're in
like a little cameo.
the Rock of Eternity. They open the door and there's 3 crocodile men playing cards at a table. It's just kind of it's kind of cool that it's just like a nod to like these characters that kind of just keep showing up in the background of Shazam comics, and there they are. They made the cartoon too. I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah, cool. So, Good, Bad, and Ugly. I mean, this one was an easy one for me. And I mean, the good was classic superhero stuff. You know, there's a bad guy, there's a superhero with a secret identity, and he's got some mystical powers, and he uses them to stop the bad guys. Yeah, it's pretty simple.
Yeah,
and there was really no violence. I mean, he never even punched one of the villains. You know, he thwarted their plans in other ways, but there was never any physical altercations. You know, there was no explosions where people were flying somewhere, you know. So pretty vanilla stuff. And I guess that was good. I mean, for a kid's cartoon.
I mean, I thought it was good. I thought I kind of mentioned what I thought the good was, like that silliness of the villains actually I thought played well to this cartoon.
Yeah.
Kind of following what you mentioned, like there's no violence, but it felt organic. It felt like these are actually like... the ways that they were able to overcome the bad guys made sense. There wasn't anything like, oh, they've got to go out and do something. They didn't
go over the top on it.
Right. There's nothing really stupid or just like, well, that doesn't make any sense.
Well, the superheroes'
no logical jumps to get to the end. It just kind of made sense.
Yeah, superheroes' reaction to the villain was on par with what the villain was trying to do. You know, there was no over the top either way. You know, there was danger. You could sense there was danger. Like, if they don't stop him, this bad guy's going to do bad things.
Right.
You know, but it didn't require violence, and it didn't require, with one exception, taking hostages or you know putting someone's life in danger. Yeah. I mean, it was kind of fun that because the superhero matched the silliness of the villains.
Yeah, and they played up the idea of having to use the wisdom of Solomon. You know, that's one of his attributes, right? He's extra smart, so he's able to rely on that, and not just all the power and strength.
Just some brute force.
Yeah. So I like that. I thought that was good. And then I'm a bit of a Shazam fan anyway. So
I can tell you brought your comic book and a couple of action figures.
I did get some reference here.
Yeah, I love it though.
So I thought that was the good in it. And then for bad, I mean, I didn't have a whole lot of bad. Really, Uncle Dudley, and by extension, all of episode 7.
Right. So tell me, you didn't like Uncle Dudley? Yeah, I felt that. You know, what I wrote here under bad was the villains, you know, started with promise and then just like didn't follow through, and they underperformed.
Yeah.
And then there were a lot of unnecessary characters. Uncle Dudley is one of them. I mean, if he's comic relief, okay, but he really wasn't. Right. He'd just taken up space.
I wish they had used Tawny more.
Yeah, because he was a cool character.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and he made sense of it right off the bat in the first episode. I mean, he's involved with the zoo, and and
he had good suggestions. Yeah, on how to stop this guy. And the rest of the series, he just seemed annoyed. Yeah, you guys are underusing me. And then for the ugly, I didn't really see anything. I mean, it was pretty harmless.
Yeah, no, there was no ugly. It was fine. It was
There were no cultural tropes or
that was the biggest thing.
Peril or you
Yeah, I mean there was nothing that was ridiculous. Yeah, I mean it was fine. But I had 2 random notes that I written down that. So every episode begins with this description of, it's about a minute long, talking about who Shazam is, and Billy Batson, and how he becomes Shazam, and he's got the powers.
Star reporter Billy Batson,
and he's got the power. Like what Shazam spells out, and then there's Mary Batson, and she has the power of Selena, and a bunch of other broads.
Yeah,
like we can't list all the other ones because
just say a bunch of other ones. We don't have time for that.
Yeah. She's a chick.
Yeah.
She's got chick powers. Like you couldn't be bothered to actually like if you're just gonna say Selena and some other people, don't mention it. Just say she says Shazam and she turns into Mary Marvel. Right. Awesome.
Done.
Why did you need to kind of just like we'll throw a carrot out there and then we'll just gotta leave it.
Right. And the best part was that was in every episode.
Every episode. Yeah.
It's great.
And then
that made me smile.
And then the other thing is the transformation sequence.
Yeah.
Every single time, every single character,
same cell.
every time they do it, it's Shazam, and it's Billy, or if it's Billy, if they're all doing it together, it's Billy and Mary together saying Shazam,
and then Captain Marvel,
and you see them and then Freddy says Captain Marvel, and he transforms, but it's the same sequence. There's the clouds and a bolt of lightning, and then down to them standing there and like this,
and they vibrate, and
it's like
there's like little white lines
that come around, and suddenly and then they turn, and then but it's every episode, every time. Like, you don't need. I mean, just time. It's time for Captain Marvel. Let's cut to them flying as the Marvels. We don't need. I mean, it's
we don't need the transformation scene every single episode,
especially multiple times in an episode.
Find a phone booth or a rotating door.
Multiple times in an episode is too much. Once is fine. Okay,
sure. I get it now.
But when you spend a whole minute setting it up and seeing every single one of them transform, you understand it. If you really want that transformation, it's there.
And it always seemed awkward when Billy and Mary would say Shazam, and then a half a second later, Captain Marvel.
It's Shazam.
Yeah.
Captain Marvel.
Wait, guys, I'm here too. Yeah, it just seemed awkward.
But that said, as I said at the jump, that's what I remember. That's 5-year-old me remembers them saying Shazam, and then followed by like a half a beat later is Captain Marvel, and them transforming. I remember that.
You know what I'm going to do now? Anytime anyone says Shazam, I'm going to say Captain Marvel.
But you gotta wait a second.
Yeah. Did you guys see the movie Shazam? Captain Marvel. And see who picks up on it. Because I have some friends who just use that word as a, an exclamation.
You're friends with Gomer Pyle?
Yeah, exactly. Like Gomer Pyle.
Shazam!
Captain Marvel. I need to trick someone into watching that with me. And as soon as he says Shazam, I'll say Captain Marvel, and I'll just look and see what they do.
Oh, good luck getting somebody to watch that with you.
Right, yeah. That's. Hey, Robert, what are you doing? You want to come over and watch some Gomer Pyle? Where are you going? I got to go over to John's. He's going to make me watch Gomer Pyle so he can do the Captain Marvel bit.
He's got his bit I got to go sit through again.
Again.
All right, so score 1 to 10. Where did Shazam?
I had written a number down, and this always happens to me. I write the number down, and then we talk about it, and I reflect on it a little better and a little more, and it goes up or down. Mm-hmm. I never wind up with the number that I came to the table with. Partly because I understand, from your history of it, I understand a little more about what's going on. I was at a 5, and I'm going to be at a 6 now.
Okay.
Because, I liked it. I was disappointed in the villains. I was confused with the timeline, and it just wasn't my thing. Mm-hmm. Not saying it was a bad cartoon. I don't think it was a bad cartoon. It just, I want more. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I stuck at a 6.
Yeah, I had 6.5 down. For the similar, it's fine.
Exactly.
It's a better than average cartoon.
Right.
I think that half point's probably my nostalgia.
Sure.
Just kind of like, I remember, enough for me to remember. And there's probably another point, the fact that it's Shazam, and I like Shazam. But yeah, I mean, there's the good and the bad things just kind of offset.
Yeah.
It's a show, like I went back and rewatched some of these episodes, which is always a good sign. I mean, there's some that we were like, I don't want to watch this again. Yeah. But no, I thought it worked well. I don't think it's great, but I was was
The
entertained.
potential is there that
Yeah.
it could be really cool.
And I was entertained, and you know what? 12 episodes was probably enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that actually helped. That worked in its favor. That they did not overdo this. Like, I got to go through more of Uncle Dudley's silliness.
No, that's fine. Yeah, because how many other stories are you going to come up with? All the episodes stood alone too, except for the Black Adam return.
Mm-hmm.
They could all stand alone, and there wasn't a lot of overlay. I didn't need to see episode 2 to understand what was going on in episode 3, which was kind of good.
Yeah.
Except for the Black Adam character shows up twice, and you kind of needed to know who he was when he came back. But I'm with you. I think it's a fine cartoon.
It was good, and if it went any longer, we probably wouldn't have been stuck with Hoppy the Marvel Bunny. So
right. Well, thank goodness for that.
We've avoided that altogether.
Yeah, I enjoyed it, but I don't want to see it again. But I do want to learn more about the comic books now. I want to know more about the story. And maybe I'll go watch that movie now, the live action movie that came out recently. I haven't seen that yet. I saw the Black Adam Blu-ray that you dropped off here, but I haven't seen the Shazam show with, who's that actor that...
Zachary Levi,
yeah. Which he looks pretty funny, actually, in the prequel or the previews that I saw.
Yeah.
Yeah, so...
Yeah, no, the original one that came out, I thought was really good. That was a couple years ago, and then the new one comes out soon, on the 17th.
Okay. Oh, this month.
Yeah, so...
Oh, St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to that one, too.
Cool.
But yeah, I mean, by all means, if you get a chance to go back and read any of especially the current run... Since they revamped him multiple times. I mean,
sure.
But I think they've done a pretty good job of bringing him back and kind of fleshing him out. But
I'll check it out.
But I'm a fan, so.
So what do we have? We have some plans for the next episode, right?
Yeah, next time we're going to go. So this is 12 episodes. We're going to go for a 140 episode series and into the 80s with the real, and into the 80s and 90s, actually,
and 90s,
with the real Ghostbusters.
Yeah, with Slimer.
Yeah. I think that'll be interesting.
I promise you I will not watch all 149 episodes, but I will do my best.
I will do what I can.
I do remember watching the real Ghostbusters on
Yes,
on
I remember
TV.
It being on.
I remember watching it a lot, so some of them will be familiar. But,
so that should, if nothing else, it should make for a good discussion.
Yeah, I agree. I love the movies. I love the whole concept of Ghostbusters.
Yeah.
So it should be fun.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, I hear, Mom, I think it's time for us to go outside. So that means cartoon time is over. I'm John.
I'm Robert.
And this is Toon Talk.
Hey, thanks for listening. If you want more Toon Talk, you can find us on Twitter @ToonTalkGuys.
Or if you've got questions, comments, or suggestions, you can email us at toontalkguys@gmail.com.